I was little. I was
Tiny,
very little,
yeah.
tiny little person.
Right.
And that's what I am, is a very
Sure,
small
makes
person.
perfect sense.
At 78, Sally Field has finally spoken candidly about one of the most complicated relationships of her life, a love that was as thrilling as it was destructive. To the public, they seemed like Hollywood's dream couple, the picture of glamour and passion. But behind closed doors, the reality was far more turbulent. In her own words, he was the only man who could make her feel both utterly adored and completely diminished all at once. So who was he, and what truly unfolded between them? Let's find out. The dark childhood. Sally never escaped. Sally Field's story begins in Pasadena, California, where she was born on November 6, 1946. When her parents separated just 4 years later, she was left to navigate a childhood filled with anxiety and uncertainty. In her memoir, In Pieces, she recalls spending hours in the school nurse's office, unable to shake a constant sense of dread. She never quite knew if she was afraid of school itself or simply afraid of life in general. Life at home brought little comfort. Her mother, also an actress, eventually remarried stuntman Jock Mahoney. To young Sally, he was an intimidating figure, tall, striking, and commanding. She described the complicated mix of emotions he stirred in her, fear and admiration intertwined. That confusing dynamic, she later admitted, carried into her adult life, shaping the kinds of relationships she would seek. But behind the surface, something darker was happening. In Pieces, Field revealed that she endured sexual abuse at the hands of her stepfather. She recounted chilling details of being lured into his room, where what began as innocent requests would quickly cross into deeply disturbing territory. The abuse never escalated into rape, but the trauma of those experiences left scars that followed her well into adulthood. She wrestled with conflicting emotions, questioning whether his restraint was an act of love or simply another form of control. Though the abuse ended when she was 14, the damage had already been done. Despite the pain, Field later acknowledged that Mahoney's volatile presence forced her to develop a kind of inner strength. Unlike her passive parents, he provoked her into fighting back. As a teenager, she would climb onto the coffee table just to look him directly in the eye and scream. For her, this was survival. She believed that if she had bottled up those emotions, a part of her would not have endured. That anger also extended to protecting her brother and standing up for her family when no one else would. Amid all this turmoil, acting became her outlet. What began in high school was not about performance or fame, but survival. The stage gave her a safe place to release the emotions she couldn't express anywhere else. Then, at just 17, she hit another life-changing crossroad. She was on the verge of her big break with a role in the TV series Gidget. But right then, she found out she was pregnant. It was the kind of choice no teenager should ever have to face. Chase the career she'd always dreamed of, or put her personal life first. The decision haunted her for years, but in that moment, she felt there was no other option. So, she decided to end the pregnancy. When she returned from Mexico, she stepped almost immediately into the role of Gidget, the wide-eyed, energetic teenager that would introduce her to America. Walking into Columbia that day, Field felt like she didn't belong. The room was filled with girls who had far more experience, and she considered leaving before it was even her turn. Nervous and overwhelmed, she stumbled through her audition, certain she had blown it. Yet, something about her presence caught the executive's attention. Against all odds, she was chosen from hundreds of hopefuls. Practically overnight, Sally Field went from high school graduate to the lead of a network sitcom. When Gidget ended in 1966, Field found herself in the tabloids for her off-screen relationship with her co-star, Pete Dooley, who played her character's brother-in-law. While magazines hinted at something serious, she downplayed it in an interview, insisting that the two were simply enjoying each other's company. and laughing off Hollywood's tendency to exaggerate. Around this same time, Field also popped up on The Dating Game, long before it became a celebrity showcase. Her episode aired in October 1966, just 6 months after Gidget wrapped. The contestants included her surfing coach from the show, a high school classmate, and a stranger who managed a restaurant. After a round of playful questions, including a request to make the sound of a gigantical, convincing kiss, Field picked the stranger, Bachelor number 3. The prize was a dream date that included a helicopter ride, dinner, and a show, but years later, she admitted she never went. Looking back, she joked that the missed date might have been life-changing. Meanwhile, her career was at a crossroads. Gidget had been canceled. Her first film, The Way West, wouldn't come out for 2 more years, and she was offered the lead role in a new sitcom, The Flying Nun. Sally wasn't thrilled with the part and initially turned it down, but her stepfather warned her that rejecting the role could kill her career before it had even begun. Out of fear, she accepted. That decision would haunt her. The show became an easy punchline for comedians, and Sally often felt like the butt of the joke. She struggled with humiliation and admitted that she hated playing a character she considered shallow and silly. The stress eventually broke her down on set, where she collapsed in frustration during a scene. Her co-star, Madeline Sherwood, quietly handed her the address to the actor's studio, telling her to show up the following Tuesday. Field did, and that moment marked the beginning of her deeper growth as an actress. Her personal life during those years was just as turbulent. While filming The Flying Nun, she briefly dated Monkees star Davy Jones. Their relationship was lighthearted, filled with laughter, though behind the scenes, Field recalled uncomfortable experiences with other members of the band making inappropriate advances. Later, she was linked to songwriter Jimmy Webb, a relationship that Field described in her memoir as deeply unsettling, recounting a disturbing encounter that left her shaken. Webb, years later, remembered things differently, but the experience remained a painful memory for Field. As her fame grew, she also crossed paths romantically with actor Lee Majors, who was himself on the rise. Their relationship fell into the swirl of Hollywood gossip, and Majors would even reference his time with her years later in the song Unknown Stuntman, which became the theme for his series The Fall Guy. The lyrics playfully hinted at his many high-profile romances, including one with Sally Field. By the late 1960s, Sally Field was learning the hard way what it meant to balance sudden fame, public scrutiny, and her own search for respect as an actress. The cost of Hollywood validation. When The Flying Nun wrapped up in 1970, Sally didn't rush into another big television role. Instead, she took on small TV movies, made guest appearances, and most importantly, began working with the legendary Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. She was determined to grow as an actress and not just be remembered for light-hearted sitcom roles. Her next attempt at television came in 1973 with The Girl with Something Extra, but it lasted only 1 season. That failure became a turning point. Sally committed herself fully to studying the craft of acting, turning down every TV offer that came her way. She later admitted that when her sitcom days ended, she told herself it was time to focus on becoming a serious actress. Her persistence paid off when she landed a role in Bob Rafelson's 1976 film Stay Hungry. The movie also marked Arnold Schwarzenegger's Hollywood debut, but Field's performance stood out as proof that she was capable of more than sitcom comedy. There was even a colorful story about her audition, where she recalled that Rafelson wanted someone who was a good kisser. She claimed she sealed the part with a kiss, though Rafelson denied the account years later. Regardless, the role signaled that she was ready to be taken seriously. That same year, her real breakthrough came with Sybil, a TV movie about a woman with multiple personalities. Field's performance earned her an Emmy and completely changed the way audiences viewed her. Suddenly, the former girl next door from television was being recognized as a powerhouse performer, but the role also left her self-conscious. She later admitted that while people praised her acting, some criticized her looks, calling her unattractive after the role. It shook her confidence, especially when competing against the glamorous leading ladies of the era. Then came Burt Reynolds. At the time, Reynolds was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and when he personally called Sally to offer her the role of Carrie in Smokey and the Bandit, she felt flattered and saw it as a chance to reshape her image. She figured that if the most popular actor in Hollywood thought she was appealing enough to star alongside him, maybe others would too. Directed by Hal Needham, a former stuntman and close friend of Reynolds, Smokey and the Bandit became a massive box office hit in 1977. Needham had originally envisioned the movie as a low-budget project, with Jerry Reed as the lead. But Reynolds' involvement completely changed the film's scale. With Reynolds on board, Needham secured financing, though many doubted his ability to direct. Despite a modest budget of just over $5 million, the film went on to gross more than $120 million. In the film, Sally played a runaway bride who falls for Reynolds' charming trucker. On screen, the chemistry between them was undeniable. But off-screen, things were less romantic during their kissing scenes. Sally later admitted that Reynolds was not a great kisser, even describing the experience as overly messy. Still, the two began dating almost immediately while filming, with Sally recalling that their connection felt instant, as if they had known each other for years. Her mother, Margaret Field, wasn't convinced the relationship would last. In a private conversation with Reynolds, she asked him to be gentle with her daughter when the inevitable breakup came. While Reynolds insisted he never intended to hurt her, Sally would later reveal that their relationship, though filled with laughter and fun, was also complicated and, at times, painful. Meanwhile, Sally's career reached new heights in 1979 with Norma Ray, directed by Martin Ritt. Playing a factory worker who fights to unionize her workplace, she delivered a performance that earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress. Winning the Oscar was a surreal experience for her. She later admitted she felt almost outside her own body as her name was called. Yet, that victory might never have happened if not for Ritt. The studio didn't want Sally for the part and had offered it to several others before Ritt fought to cast her, promising he would win the battle. And he did. For Sally, it was the first time a director had truly gone to bat for her. Though she continued to work with Reynolds on projects like Hooper and The End, their romance began to fade by the early 1980s. By the time Smokey and the Bandit 2 was released in 1980, their relationship was unraveling. They officially ended things in 1982, just as Sally's career was hitting full stride. Looking back, she described Reynolds as far less kind in private than he appeared to the public. A reminder that what audiences saw on screen was not always the full story. Burt Reynolds, Lover and Heartache. When Burt Reynolds asked Sally Field to star alongside him in Smokey and the Bandit, she couldn't quite understand why he was so eager to cast her. At the time, Field was known mostly as a television actress with just one film credit to her name, and she was struggling to break into movies. This was long before the world knew her from films like Steel Magnolias, Forrest Gump, or Lincoln. In her memoir, In Pieces, Field later revealed that by the time they met, Reynolds' fame had already become a force he used to control those around him. The very next day, after she arrived on set, Reynolds invited her on a date, and from there, their romance began with an intensity that swept them both up quickly. Field would later describe it as a match of flaws, a connection that felt powerful but deeply unsteady. She admitted she didn't feel safe being honest with him, a red flag she ignored. Instead, she found herself adjusting who she was just to keep his affection, quietly erasing parts of herself in the process. To the public, they looked like Hollywood's golden couple, But in her memoir, Field described their relationship as confusing and complicated, filled with love, but also pain. She remembered Reynolds as a man who demanded that her career and needs always come second to his own. In her words, she became a shadow of herself, silent and hidden behind her own eyes. Despite their bond, trouble followed them. Reynolds proposed several times, often in uncomfortable ways, but Field always said no. On the set of Norma Ray, he nervously offered her a ring, but she turned it down, knowing their issues, especially his need for control, were never addressed. She recalled being afraid of even running into men she knew, worried about how Reynolds would react. His possessiveness went so far that he once insisted she wear body makeup if he thought her skin was too pale. Over time, she stopped existing for herself, dressing, walking, and living for him. Reynolds, however, believed he played an important role in her career. He often claimed he pushed her to take Norma Ray, though Field remembered it differently. She recalled him dismissing the script, even insulting the lead character, and accusing her of letting ambition overtake her. Their argument over the role became a turning point for her. Determined to move forward, she chose the film anyway, reclaiming a piece of her independence. That independence paid off. Field won Best Actress at the 1979 Cannes Film Festival, a moment Reynolds had doubted would happen. Later, when she earned her first Academy Award nomination, he refused to attend the ceremony with her, leaving her friends to stand by her side as she won. His bitterness only deepened, but for Field, the recognition validated her choice to follow her instincts. Eventually, she cut him out of her life completely, explaining later that he was not someone she could be around. Reflecting on the relationship, she came to see it as a way of unconsciously working through her past, particularly the trauma of her stepfather's abuse. In her words, she was trying to make it work this time, attempting to rewrite what had once been broken. Even after they parted ways, Reynolds never let go of her. He frequently spoke about her in interviews, often calling her the love of his life. In his memoir, he admitted regret over how things ended, saying he wished he had been more mature and less reckless. He grieved the relationship for years, at times leaving her notes and postcards, hoping she might come back. In one of his last interviews, he admitted she was the one who got away. Field, on the other hand, kept her distance. For decades, she avoided contact, believing he was not good for her. Still, she acknowledged that their time together was unforgettable. When Reynolds passed away, she reflected on how their relationship would always remain a part of her history and her heart. Even with the complications and pain, those years were etched permanently into her life, a chapter she could never truly leave behind. A romance Sally wanted to escape. In the 1980s, before marrying her second husband, Sally briefly dated Johnny Carson, the legendary Tonight Show host. The problem was, the connection simply wasn't there, and Field went to unusual lengths to end things. Carson, known nationwide as the king of late night, had built his career on charm, wit, and quick humor. That magnetic energy made him perfect for television, but for Field, it was simply too much. Years later, during a conversation with Andy Cohen, she admitted that she was never particularly interested in him. After her breakup with Burt Reynolds, she went on a few dates with Carson, but her heart wasn't in it. In her words, there was nothing wrong with him. She just wasn't interested. Instead of telling him directly, Field came up with a dramatic excuse. She told Carson she was having a breakdown and needed to be sent away. It was her way of backing out of the relationship without hurting his feelings. Looking back, she described herself as someone who simply couldn't say no, which is why she resorted to such extremes. Their romance was short-lived, taking place after Carson's divorce from Joanna Holland and Field's split from Reynolds. Some reports at the time even claimed they were in love, but Field herself painted a different picture years later. She once described the dynamic as the octopus and the reluctant little guppy, making it clear she was the one trying to swim away. What makes the story more surprising is how natural their chemistry looked when she appeared on The Tonight Show in 1979. The two joked back and forth, even playfully spraying shaving cream at each other, and the audience loved it. But Field was an actress, skilled at hiding her true feelings, and what looked like sparks on screen wasn't at all what she felt in real life. Not long after that chapter, Field turned her focus to her work. She took on the role of Edna Spaulding in Places in the Heart, a performance that would change the way she saw herself. In an interview with People, she explained that for years she had been convincing herself she didn't need anyone, but through Edna, she began to understand that people are meant to rely on each other. The role led to her second Academy Award for Best Actress, just 5 years after her first win for Norma Rae. But it wasn't her acting that people remembered most from that Oscar night in 1985. Instead, it was her acceptance speech, which quickly became one of the most misquoted in Academy history. The real line she delivered was, "You like me. Right now, you like me." But it was twisted into the exaggerated version, "You like me, you really, really like me." That misquote spread so widely that it overshadowed her true message, and critics often dismissed the moment as self-indulgent. For Field, the frustration wasn't just being misquoted, but that her speech was reduced to a sound bite without context. In reality, she had been reflecting on the difference between her 2 Oscar wins. The first came so quickly that she could barely take it in, but with the second, she wanted to savor the recognition. After years of being typecast in lighthearted roles like The Flying Nun, she had finally been accepted as a serious actress. Just before her famous line, she had told the audience, "I've wanted more than anything to have your respect." Field's childhood played a role in that need for acknowledgement. Growing up with parents who worked in the film industry but struggled financially, she knew early on how tough the business could be. That's why her second Oscar carried so much weight. Reflecting on the moment years later, she told Oprah Winfrey that her words were about allowing herself to feel the reality of success. For her, it wasn't arrogance, it was acceptance, accepting that she had done the work and that it was being recognized. She explained that in a career full of highs and lows, it's easy to get lost in the difficult times, doubting your worth and your talent. But if you never stop to appreciate the good moments, you lose the strength to keep moving forward. That night on the Oscar stage, with the spotlight flashing for a commercial break, she tried to claim the moment for herself. It wasn't about ego. It was about finally believing she had earned the respect she had been chasing her entire career. Why Sally never feared aging roles. In 1989, Sally Field stepped into one of her most unforgettable roles in the beloved film Steel Magnolias. On screen, it became a heart-wrenching classic. But behind the camera, the atmosphere was anything but gentle. Field later revealed that working with director Herbert Ross was difficult for everyone, especially for a young Julia Roberts, just starting out in Hollywood. Ross could be cutting, even going so far as to demand that Roberts remove a small mole from her face. Yet, amid the tension, the cast forged something special. Field, along with Shirley MacLaine, Dolly Parton, Olympia Dukakis, Julia Roberts, and Daryl Hannah, leaned on one another. They threw parties, played games, and built a genuine friendship that carried them through the grueling shoot. For Field, Steel Magnolias would always remain both a challenge and a cherished memory. By the early 1990s, she was ready to bring laughter back into her career. In 1991, she starred in Soap Dish, a comedy set behind the scenes of a soap opera. She later recalled how much joy that movie brought her, describing it as one of the most fun experiences she ever had on set. Then, in 1993, she joined Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire, playing the ex-wife of a man so desperate to be near his kids that he disguised himself as a Scottish nanny. Williams was famous for cracking up entire film crews with his improvisations, but Sally never broke character, no matter how outrageous he got. Her refusal to laugh drove him crazy. But for her, it was a matter of professionalism. Around the time Mrs. Doubtfire was released, her personal life was beginning to unravel. Her marriage to Alan Greisman was strained. He enjoyed the social scene, but she struggled with anxiety in those settings and preferred a quieter life. Field would later say that instead of cherishing what they once shared, they focused on each other's flaws. By 1994, the couple had divorced, marking the end of her second marriage. That same year, Sally returned to drama in Forrest Gump, where she played the mother of Tom Hanks's character. Some audiences found it unusual that she had played Hanks's love interest just a few years earlier in Punchline, and now was cast as his mother. For Field, it was never strange. She had always been written as older than his character in their first film together, and in real life, she was a decade his senior. For her, the role of Mrs. Gump was not only natural, but one of the most fulfilling experiences of her career. By the mid-1990s, Field was ready to step behind the camera. In 1996, she co-wrote and directed The Christmas Tree, a holiday TV movie about a nun who strikes up an unlikely friendship with the head gardener at Rockefeller Center. She admitted that directing wasn't her original plan, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. 2 years later, she directed an episode of the miniseries From the Earth to the Moon, and in 2000, she helmed her first feature film, Beautiful. For Field, directing was a natural extension of her love for storytelling. Acting had always been her entry point, but behind the camera, she found a new way to shape stories. As her career moved into the 2000s, Field returned more frequently to television. She appeared on Murphy Brown, earned an Emmy for her role as a bipolar mother on ER, and continued directing and acting in both TV and film. Through it all, Sally Field remained a storyteller at heart, constantly finding new ways to connect with audiences, whether in front of the camera or behind it. The health scare that changed everything. In 2005, Sally Field received a diagnosis that changed the way she thought about her health: osteoporosis. This condition weakens the bones, making them more likely to break. And for Field, the discovery came as a shock. She had no symptoms and only learned about it after undergoing a bone scan that showed her bones were thinning at a steady rate. Looking back, the diagnosis wasn't entirely unexpected. Field's family history made her especially vulnerable. Both her grandmothers and her mother, actress Margaret Field, had battled osteoporosis. On top of that, her small frame, Caucasian background, and age over 50 all added to her risk. Doctors say that while bone density naturally decreases as people grow older, osteoporosis accelerates that process, putting individuals at much higher risk of fractures. Once she understood what she was facing, Field didn't just sit back. She began a regimen of daily vitamins, calcium-rich foods, and weight-bearing exercises to help protect her bones. Thankfully, she has managed to avoid any major fractures or complications since her diagnosis. Her positive experience with the osteoporosis medication, Boniva, also gave her the confidence to appear in a nationwide campaign for the drug. At first hesitant, she eventually embraced the opportunity, recognizing how much the treatment helped her slow the effects of the disease. The ads were so well known that they even became the subject of parody on Saturday Night Live. But Field's journey went far beyond her own treatment. She became a strong public advocate for bone health, determined to raise awareness among older women. She often pointed out how easy it is to overlook the disease, since it can remain silent until serious damage occurs. Through appearances and interviews, she urged women to request bone density tests as routinely as Pap smears, highlighting the staggering statistic that 1 out of every 2 women over 50 will experience a fracture related to osteoporosis. Her advocacy turned into action with the launch of the Rally with Sally for Bone Health campaign. The initiative focused on prevention detection, and treatment, stressing that even people who maintain healthy habits can still develop the disease. Field's message was clear. Being mindful of risks and getting tested early is the best defense. She also worked to challenge stereotypes. Many people imagine osteoporosis as something that only affects frail, hunched-over elderly women. But Field reminded the public that it can affect men as well as women, often long before the signs become visible. For her, sharing her story was more than personal. It was about helping others catch the disease before it caught them. The Hollywood icon who won't slow down. At 78 years old, Sally Field is showing no signs of slowing down. Audiences know her best from unforgettable performances in Mrs. Doubtfire, Forrest Gump, Norma Ray, and Absence of Malice. But recently, she stole the spotlight on the red carpet. At the Television Academy's 27th Annual Hall of Fame ceremony, she stepped out in a shimmering blue dress that drew plenty of attention, though it was her natural gray hair that truly stood out. It was the kind of look that had people talking about gray hair goals. Field is part of a growing list of actresses, including Lorraine Bracco and Hilary Burton, who are proudly embracing their gray. And she's been refreshingly open about what aging means to her. Earlier this year, she appeared on Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast, Wiser Than Me, and spoke candidly about the stigma around getting older. Instead of feeling pressured to chase youth, she described aging as a time of freedom, saying she has let go of people-pleasing and stepped into a new kind of confidence. Professionally, she's still as ambitious as ever. In the summer, it was announced that she would star in the upcoming film Remarkably Bright Creatures, an adaptation of Shelby Van Pelt's 2022 novel. Looking back on her career, she has acknowledged the many milestones along the way, grateful for the chance to work on challenging projects with strong directors. Field remains both hopeful and clear-eyed about the future of Hollywood. When asked about gender equality in the industry, she made it clear that the fight is far from over and that progress will always require persistence. Away from the cameras, Field's proudest role has been as a mother to her 3 sons, Peter, Eli, and Sam, and as a grandmother to 5 grandchildren. She has often credited motherhood with saving her life, but she also admits that grandparenting comes with its own unique challenges. Building meaningful bonds with grandchildren, she explained, means finding a space that belongs only to them and her, beyond the role of babysitter. Now entering her late 70s, Sally Field views every new decade as a fresh chapter. She continues to carry herself with the same mix of resilience, grace, and authenticity that has made her one of Hollywood's most enduring figures.